All right. In all of our years, we have never done a straight up acoustic setup video.
Which is really surprising.
I had this idea the other day and I was like, no, we definitely did that. And I went back and looked and we haven't.
We have not, for sure, because I thought the same thing.
No, we have not. We've done things featuring acoustics, but we've never done just a straight up acoustic guitar setup guide. So I've got that brand new D18.
Yep.
It's pretty well set up out of the box. I'd like a few things changed on it. So the goal here is to show people what they need to know to be able to set up and maintain their acoustic guitars at home.
So I guess first off, we should talk about the parts that you can change. It's not quite like an electric. So for example, you don't have individual string heights. You can just use a little wrench to adjust. That does lead to some interesting things, because while you can lower this saddle, or you could put a taller saddle in, what you don't have control over is the break angle, how it comes over the saddle. So if you have too little break angle, it's going to sound buzzy and kind of weak. If you have too much break angle, it can sound a little tight, funky sound. It's not a great sound either.
Yeah.
So you really want to kind of have a nice in-between on that. The only way you can change that is by changing the neck angle itself, which brings you to a big problem with something like this because it's glued on. So you don't have that ability to do that. So if you ever hear anybody talking about a neck reset, that's what that is. It's actually taking the neck off, recutting it, putting it back in so that you can get that break angle back. Then next up is your nut. And just like an electric, it has to be at the right height, which is, honestly, it's pretty low. And your nut's pretty good on this, a little high there. But if your nut slots are too high, when you fret here, it's going to be sharp. So it's 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch clearance right there that I'm looking for. Very, very small, just like you would get if you went like this. Just real small. But you have to have this set up right, and you have to have this set up right in order for the guitar to play well. That's really the biggest parts of an acoustic. Of course, your truss rod, if it has one. We're gonna get started on, the first thing I always do is check the relief rudder.
Okay.
And
like we talked about in a previous video, not looking down the neck, because evidently that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, I know a lot of people argue with me on it. It's fine. Look, do what works for you. For me, anything that you do to a guitar should be done in playing position.
Right.
If it's sitting like this, it's gonna put some pressure to pull the neck up. So anything I do to a guitar, I always want to be in playing position, like I would hold the guitar. And in order to check relief, you can use a capo if you want. Some people do. You can also check it from multiple places. In this case, I'll do the 12th fret. But right here, if I'm looking at that, you can see that tiny bit of movement, right? Bearing in mind that when I push these 2 points, the string is going to make a straight line between them. So what I'm looking at is the curvature of the neck by how much this moves. If it doesn't move at all, like this, I know the neck is straight, or too straight. If it moves a lot, like that, it's got too much relief in it. And you'll notice some things. If it's backbowed, the neck's like this, then you're going to notice it's real buzzy down here because it's hitting these frets in the middle. If it's like this, probably sounds fine right here, and then it just gets really difficult to play. Doesn't sound so great up here. So pretty easy. To me, this needs a little less relief, so we'll adjust that. But before we do, let's check the action, because I know you mentioned it was a little high for you.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, it feels okay here in open position, but as I start to get higher up in the neck, it's just, especially on the lower strings, it's too high for me.
So I measure action at the 12th fret. You can also measure at any fret, really, if you have your spec. It doesn't matter. 12th fret's where I go. You can use millimeters, you can use inches. I still just use 64ths of an inch. This one's sitting at 3/32 of an inch on this side to almost 3 on this side. So for you, when we adjust the neck in just a second, it's probably going to pull that down to 5/64ths and 4/64ths, which is actually probably perfect for you.
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah.
So I think that just the adjusting the neck will help with that. And we'll have to play with that a little bit too. We'll go through all of it.
So we're going in the order of operations here, because obviously with an acoustic being different than an electric, to adjust the saddle height, which we may have to do, you have to physically pull the saddle out and sand it down, which is a destructive change. Same thing with the nut slots. If you file the nut slots down, you can rebuild them back, but it's kind of a pain to do. But the order of operations here with an acoustic is to do the neck first and see if that gets you where you want to be, and if not, then go saddle and nut slots.
Now, really important thing, because I have a friend that his approach to adjusting action is all in the truss rod. That is not the case. You're just trying to get the right amount of relief. So this is not, when we adjust this, it's not to get the action right. We're trying to make the guitar play right.
Right.
Adjusting the action all comes down to these 2 points.
Okay. So yeah, this being a factory setup, Martin intentionally leaves this just a touch high, knowing that if you need to bring the action down like I want to, you've got some room to do that.
You know, a lot of companies don't do that. They'll set their guitar up to be lower action, and that's going to be great, except for that one person who wants more. So I get it. You know, to me, it's like you buy a nice guitar from a place that will set the guitar up for you. So I'm okay with them being a little high. If they're a little low, that's a pain, because you got to replace the saddle. And some guitars even come with 2 saddles.
Oh.
Yeah. So
nice.
that's another thing. Winter saddle, summer saddle. That's a thing too.
Great.
I think it's unnecessary, but. All right, so let's hop in.
Okay.
Current Martin, it's a 5mm adjustable truss rod. You'll need a longer wrench to do this because it's pretty deep. Just go straight in. Make sure you use the right size wrench, so just like an electric, so you don't strip it. So you can see that's nice and tight. And what I'm going to do is, the neck currently is a little bit like this, and I want to bring it down. So I'm actually going to tighten the truss rod. It'll basically, the screw will go in and force the rod to go like that, making the neck move. Then I do this, flexing the neck a little bit. You know, there's a lot of people that talk about being afraid that they're going to break their truss rod. 25 years of doing this, I broke one truss rod, and I knew it was going to break. And I called the company beforehand. I was friends with them. I said, hey, it's going to break. Do you want me to try it anyway? They said, yeah. So I did. It broke. It's hard to break it. It's not like you're going to accidentally break it.
Yeah.
You're going to know.
Anytime I adjust my truss rod too, I only go about a quarter turn at a time.
Yeah.
Let it sit. And if I need to go further than that, I go another quarter turn. But yeah, the idea of breaking your truss rod, I mean, you really have to just be turning and turning it. Basically, you kind of have to get it to the end of its throw, unless it's stuck. If it's an old guitar and it's stuck, that can
Even
be...
then, man, it's hard. It's hard to break it.
Yeah.
Because I've had plenty of those too, where it's stuck and I just, you'll hear it go.
Yeah.
And it's fine. What I would say though is if you don't use the right wrench,
yeah,
strip truss rods. That's all the time.
Yeah.
Always dealing with that. And then we're gonna go back to our little test here, and we're gonna look again. And I'm still not real happy with that. A little less. So, if you want to measure it with a feeler gauge, which I would recommend you do, about 5 thousandths of clearance. If you measure from the 12th to the 1st fret, I'm looking at the 6th, like right in between. That's where I want. It's almost always that amount. You don't have to loosen the strings. You know, a lot of people say you do. You don't. But notice how I'm holding it, because if I touch these strings with this metal rod, it's going to damage the strings.
Yep.
I like that. So you hear about people saying they want their neck straight as a board. Total crap. I know I'm going to get some hate on that. It's total nonsense. Physics don't allow for that.
Why?
You have to have some amount of curvature, otherwise the string won't clear the next fret. Let me rephrase this. If the plane of your frets is completely straight, flat, we're talking thousandths of an inch. Tiny amount. It's a tiny amount. That being said, sometimes the neck may look totally flat and the relief could be cut into the frets. It's a thing too. I've seen that, which is fine, doesn't matter. But that's why we check by doing this and not by doing this. Go ahead and look down the neck though for funsies. I mean, it looks almost dead straight, but we could have too much relief in here and it still look dead straight. So what we're gonna do now is check our nut slot height, and then we're gonna come back and check the saddle height. Because if I adjust the saddle and I have to take the nut down, it's gonna keep going down, you know what I mean? So I wanna start with the nut, make sure it's good. And I check the nut by holding 3rd fret and tapping, because it shows me, just like I did with relief, it shows me the distance of clearance that I have over the fret. And it should be almost the same actually as the relief was. So it's very small amounts. Sometimes I'll leave the G string just a little higher. The B and the E are too high. It's just a little more than I'd like. You can actually hear it.
Yeah.
It's hard to see it. But logic would tell you that the nut slot should have that same amount of clearance, right? Just the tiniest amount, as opposed to, I know it's hard to see on a camera, but Most people that know what they're doing will actually use feeler gauges to put underneath right here and then file down to the feeler gauge. Works great.
Yeah.
It's a really good way to do it. I don't do that, but you should.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. So this is these are feeler gauges. What we mentioned earlier, if you were to do relief, this is 5/1000ths. So if I was to hold the guitar in playing position and push that down, the clearance at the 6th fret, see, it's not really moving.
Oh yeah.
So pretty close to 5/1000ths. Just saying.
Close enough for government work.
I don't think you could really get it much closer. You can have this anywhere from maybe 3 to 7, maybe even 10, but I mean, that's 0.005 is where I aim for. By the way, same for acoustics and electrics. There's no difference to me. Okay, so I'm gonna take these nut slots on the high E and B down. So if it's a 13 and you use a 13 slaughter, you'll have to kind of do this a little bit. It actually needs to be bigger than 13 for the string to travel.
Right.
So if I'm doing a 9, I'll use a 10 file.
Got it.
You know
So you're going to size up one gauge, basically. Okay.
The G string on Les Pauls, that's usually a big part of that. All right, so that one was a little high. We're just going to take it down a bit. So, and I'd recommend, if you're doing this at the house, just grab something so you don't scratch your headstock up. We're not going to scratch your headstock up, but and then we're just going to take a little bit off. Also, I'm traveling at the angle that the string breaks. See what I mean? Like this angle. If I fall flat, I'm gonna have a problem. It's not gonna take much. Probably that much. Okay, now look at that.
Yo, yeah. I can even see that from back here.
Yeah.
Done. That was like maybe
2,
8 to 10
yeah,
little
bitty bit.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much. Okay, your high E is now at 4/64ths.
Nice.
Right where you wanted it, but your low E is still a little high. So we're gonna do some tweaking on it. Now that we're good on this side, we can move to the opposite and work on the actual bridge itself.
Got it.
So, all right, so we're gonna just loosen the strings up here. You know, the one tool that I don't have at my house that's ridiculous? I can't find them.
A string winder?
I have tons of them. I actually have I'm using a socket. Now, they make, a lot of these winders have this little notch in it that is for this, to do that.
Yep.
But as I mentioned, I can't even find my winder at the time, so I just use a little pair of pliers like this.
Yeah, I've done that too. Just don't, you know.
You're not actually squeezing it.
Yeah.
You know, they have a little notch. You just do that, pop it up. Pop it up. All right, so we've got the strings off now, and this is the saddle itself. Comes right out. If it doesn't come right out, sometimes they're tight. You can do the same thing, just gentle, and pull it up. I have over the years had some interesting times where people have tried to like do the math on, you know, if you wanted to lower it 1/64th, how much do you have to take off of this? I haven't figured out the math. It's not 1-to-1 at all.
Weird.
So what I do is I use a Sharpie typically so that I can see what I'm doing, and I'm gonna just hold it like this and go right down the side. And that just gives me a reference point of how much I'm taking off. I don't need to take much off, and I don't really need to take anything off of the treble side.
Right.
It's good. So you can do this 2 ways, or probably more than 2 ways, but the way I was taught was just use a piece of sandpaper, make sure you're flush, and then simple.
Right.
Super easy. They came up with a tool at some point that is genius because it makes this process quicker and super easy. It's almost brainless. So you just set the saddle in here. You adjust how much is sticking out like this. It's pretty cool, huh?
Nice.
Yeah. So it's got ball bearings.
Oh.
Race car. So always check it in between, make sure you get enough, not too much. Because again, you can't put it back. Check and make sure nothing changed, and then let's see how close we are.
Good? Oh yeah. Way better.
minor adjustments. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah, it feels way better down here.
I haven't played it at all.
Yeah, that feels great. So to recap, our steps were measure,
Yeah, look at it.
see what needs to change, if anything. Step 2 is adjust neck adjustment,
Truss rod. Yep.
truss rod adjustment. Then step 3 and step 4 are one and the same. Start with the nut, file that down if needed, and then move over to the saddle.
Correct. You know, always measure, because if you don't like what you do, you need to be able to get back to square one.
Right.
It's always the case with every setup video we've done. Always make sure you know where you have started at, so that you can figure out where to get from there. And then, you know, put some fresh strings on it and rock and roll. For me, and I would say that this is going to be for like 99% of people I know, and that spec is super easy. 5 thousandths of relief, we're measuring from here to here in playing position at the 6th fret. About the same on your here on your nut slots, just the slightest amount of clearance, just the slightest amount, a little more on the G. And then your action, if you measure below the string at the 12th fret, 5/64ths over here, 4/64ths over here, graduating down. Electric, acoustic, doesn't matter. Classical is different, but we're not talking about classical. That is the spec that I set every guitar up to.
Yeah.
Period. It's not magical.
Yeah. And you do all my setups and have done for years. And I like how
Yeah.
you set my stuff up.
It's always the same. Measure, be consistent, and find what you like. 5 thousandths, 5/64ths, 4/64ths, and just have these as, you know, just a little bit of a gap in them.